All right, let's jump right in. When you think of the ancient world, what comes to mind? Probably legions, aqueducts, maybe some colossal empires. But today, we're going on a different kind of journey. We're going to follow the money to uncover the real economic engine that was secretly powering antiquity.
And hey, it makes sense, right? The story of Rome is absolutely epic. I mean, we look to the Romans for their incredible military, their system of laws, their mastery of engineering. These guys were conquerors who built an empire that literally shaped the Western world. That's the story we all know and love.
But what if that story, with its focus on military power, is missing a huge piece of the puzzle? What if the empire we see as the pinnacle of power was, economically speaking, more of a giant consumer than a creator? That's the big question we're diving into today.
So, to really understand this, we have to look past the battlefields and into the marketplaces. We've got to dig into what Rome was actually producing, what it was buying, and most importantly, where all of its incredible wealth was actually ending up.
This quote from our source material just gets right to the heart of it. Rome's consumption overran her production. Now, specia is just a fancy word for money in the form of coins, gold and silver. So this is telling us that Rome was this voracious consumer, buying so much more than it sold that it created a constant river of treasure flowing right out of the empire.
So the key here is this massive trade imbalance. I mean, sure, Rome exported some things, wine, pottery, glass, but that was nothing compared to what it was importing. From the East came all the luxuries that defined the Roman elite: spices, silks, precious gems. And it wasn't just stuff, it was ideas, it was culture, philosophy, math, science, all flowing from east to west.
Which, of course, begs the question, if Rome is spending so much of its treasure, who was getting rich? Where was the final destination for all that gold and silver that was pouring out of the empire?
And the answer, as we're about to see, is ancient India. It was, quite literally, the world's workshop. While Rome was the military administrative capital, India was the industrial and commercial hub, the great producer nation that was supplying the empires of the West.
And this wasn't some short-lived thing. We're talking for thousands of years. Right up until the Industrial Revolution, the East, with India at its core, was the manufacturing center of the globe. The source material notes that while the West was still, chipping a stone and making a hatchet, India was already producing massive iron columns and incredible textiles. It's just a totally different level.
This kind of economic dominance didn't just happen by chance. As you can see here, it was built on three incredibly powerful pillars. First, a strong agricultural base, where farming was actually seen as a noble profession. Second, highly organized industrial guilds of super-skilled artisans. And third, these massive commercial networks with amazing roads connecting all the major production centers.
Now, a common misconception is that ancient India was kind of isolated, walled off by mountains and oceans. But the truth is, its merchants didn't just overcome these barriers, they completely mastered them, especially the sea.
This is so important to get. Long before a lot of other cultures, Indian sailors figured out how to use the predictable monsoon winds. This wasn't about hugging the coast, this allowed them to sail directly across the huge Indian Ocean. This kind of advanced navigation gave them control over the most important trade routes of the era.
And get this, for a piece of incredible ancient technology, old Buddhist texts describe sailors using shore-sighting birds. Imagine you're way out at sea. You release a bird. If land is nearby, the bird flies towards it, and the ship just follows. If there's no land in sight, the bird just circles back and returns to the ship. It's so ingenious, and it just shows a level of experience that only comes from centuries of open ocean sailing.
Okay, so we have our producer, India, and we have our consumers, the great empires of the West. Now let's actually trace the path of these goods and see just how far back this relationship really goes. This timeline really puts everything into perspective. This is not just a Roman story. As early as 2500 BCE, we find Indian goods in Egyptian tombs. Around 1000 BCE, the Bible talks about King Solomon's fleets returning from the port of Ophir, which many identify as ancient India, just loaded with treasures. Later, Babylon's greatness was built on its control of Indian trade. Rome was simply the last and biggest in a long, long line of Western empires fueled by Indian commerce. And we have concrete proof of all this. The evidence is literally baked into our languages. The Hebrew word for peacock, tuki, comes from the Tamil word toke. Archaeologists have found the remains of Roman trading colonies in southern India. But the most dramatic evidence, the smoking gun really, is the coins. Huge caches of Roman gold and silver coins have been dug up all over southern India.
That's the physical proof of that drain of species we talked about.
So what does all of this actually mean? It means we need to adjust our perspective. We need to look at the ancient world not just through the lens of military conquest, but through the lens of commerce and trade.
And when you do that, when you follow the money, the familiar story completely changes. Rome is still the great administrator, the great conqueror. But the engine of production, the workshop that created the wealth and luxury that defined the age, that wasn't in the West. It was firmly in the East, in the fields, workshops, and ports of ancient India.
It's a powerful reminder that history isn't fixed in stone. The narrative we accept so often depends on the questions we ask and the evidence we choose to follow. And it really leaves you wondering, what other settled stories could be turned completely upside down just by looking at them from a different angle?